Hey everyone, Noor Jahan here. I'm here to share some tips for anyone who knows a shooting survivor or meets a shooting survivor. A lot of times when people meet other people who have really heavy experiences, like being involved in a shooting or having witnessed a shooting in any way, or losing a loved one from one, people don't really know how to react or interact with that person in the moment or just generally when other things come up. So, I have a couple of tips that I want to share with you. I have three to be exact. So, my first tip, and this is something that is really hard to do, so I want to challenge you to try to do this. Tip number one is try not to share your own horror stories or stories about somebody that you know who has had that experience. It's a really natural thing to do to want to connect with somebody based on your own experiences and say, oh my goodness, I know this person who, had this happen to them. A lot of times the stories are not always encouraging, even if they are encouraging stories and you feel like, oh, it's a story of hope and happiness. This person went through a shooting and now they're doing great and they're living in this way and everything's wonderful. Um, it's not always the best way to connect with somebody who's survived a shooting. Um, Usually, when they share what's happened to them, it's best to just listen and hold space for them. So that's my tip number two. My tip number two is, when you hear about somebody who has experienced that, whether they're telling their story or you know that they've experienced this, holding space for them and allowing them to just speak freely about their experience without judgment or encouragement. That's another thing that's hard to do. I think we're tempted to just tell everybody, oh, it's going to be fine, or oh, you're so lucky that you survived, or, we always have our words that make us feel better, but when you're thinking about the person who actually experienced it and the person that you care about and the person you want to help and be there for, the best way to be there for them in a lot of cases is really just listening and allowing them to just share whatever it is that's on their mind, share their story in a way that's really vulnerable without you kind of trying to fix it or make it feel better. And just kind of giving them that space is really important. If it's a passing conversation, you don't necessarily have to bring it up and say, you can talk about it right now and kind of dig into things because they may not want to get into it that deeply in that moment. But when it is time and they do want to open up about it, just kind of letting them have that space and share their story is really, really valuable and really important. Um, and then the last thing, the last tip that I have, number three, is about checking in on them when things come up. So this is a fine line. A lot of times people will come up to shooting survivors and tell them about things that are happening, like, oh, did you hear there was a shooting here? Or, oh, did you hear about this? That is not something that I recommend. That's not a good way to check in because they may not be prepared for the reaction that they're going to have, and just hearing it randomly out of the blue is not always fun. To be honest, I like to actively check the news or social media at certain times of the day, so I make sure that I'm not going to get triggered right before I go to sleep or, first thing in the morning when I wake up. So I don't recommend that. But what I do recommend doing is when something does come up, when the time feels appropriate, so, it's something that's been on the news a lot, just checking in with them and seeing how they're doing. You don't even have to say why you're checking in with them. You can just say, a lot has been going on lately, or, whatever it is that feels inviting enough for them to share if something has come up for them, but not like, hey, did you watch the news? Did you see what's happening? Because a lot of times when mass shootings take place and there's a lot of news coverage, it can be really triggering and hard for people to hear about. So it's just nice sometimes when you feel like you have a support system. You may step in and check in on them during a time where they feel great and fine. They're just going through their day and everything's good. You also might check in on them during a time where they really need somebody. So I think that's a really huge thing, and it's an ongoing thing. So if there's somebody in your life who you know has experienced something like that, it's really nice to be able to know that they have a support system and for you to be a part of that support system. So those are my 3 tips for anyone who knows or comes across a person who's survived any kind of shooting. Unfortunately, it's more and more people every day, and hopefully we'll change that. Until we see massive change like that, just, it's nice to be able to have the tools going into it. So thanks for listening. Feel free to follow or get in contact with me if you have any questions at all. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day.